An astonishing number of Honda Jazz owners buy another, and the Mark IV model we're looking at here aims to keep them loyal. But the Japanese brand also needs to attract new converts to its clever little Super Mini, hence the decision to switch exclusively to a full hybrid power plant for this latest model. Plus there's an SUV-style crossover variant that aims to play to the Nissan Juke and Captur crowd. The good news is that despite the all-new battery technology, the passenger compartment is still as flexible and practical as ever.
What should a modern Super Mini be? Well, most brands have considered that question and come to much the same conclusion. Most brands except Honda. Here's their take on your next small hatch, this 4th generation Jazz. Bit different, isn't it? This model line has built up quite a worldwide following over its 2 decades of production, enjoying most of its global recognition with Jazz badging, but also known as the Honda Fit in the US and Japan. Cumulative international sales had exceeded 7.5 million by the time of this Mark IV version's launch in early 2020, with over 400,000 of those registered in the UK. And it's been built all around the world, including in China, where the government likes it so much they've allowed Honda to retain a majority stake in the manufacturing plant. You tend to forget now that prior to the Jazz's original launch back in 2001, Honda had virtually no presence at all in the Super Mini segment. Early versions of the Civic outgrew that class of car in the 80s, and poorly conceived subsequent small hatches from the brand, like the Honda Logo, which sold for a year at the turn of the century, really suggested that the company might never make a credible Super Mini ever again. But then in 2001 we got the surprisingly clever GD series 1st generation Jazz, which reimagined what a Super Mini could be, thinking further evolved by the Mark II GE series model in 2008, and that was in turn succeeded by this current car's predecessor, the 3rd generation GK series version of 2015. All 3 designs sold primarily because they offered the largest and the cleverest cabin that could be had in the Super Mini segment. But that is not the only headline attribute that characterises this 4th generation version. At its introduction in early 2020, this Mark IV Jazz was offered in both standard and SUV-inspired cross-style guises, and it was the first of the brand's new era electrified e-technology models, Honda announcing that going forward, this car would sell only with a full hybrid engine, just like a Toyota Yaris. It's not the first time that we've seen a Jazz hybrid though. A version of the Mark II model, powered by the Honda Insight-derived IMA hybrid system, was sold between 2011 and 2015. The freshly developed eHEV system used here, though, which features 2 compact motors combined with a 1.5-litre petrol engine, is a much more sophisticated setup, though, primarily in the way that it allows the option for limited all-electric driving. And that's another thing which pitches this Honda against the Toyota Yaris, but it differentiates it from the various mild hybrid Super Mini models from Ford, from Hyundai and from Kia, which aren't really proper hybrids at all. Honda doesn't do half measures like that. Everything here, including the clever Magic Seat system, which continues with this Mark IV design, is engineered with a thoroughness which explains why this Jazz enjoys a higher level of customer loyalty than any of its competitors. But that's going to be tested with the higher pricing which must inevitably accompany the new electrified technology. Can this new era Jazz justify it? Let's find out. What exactly is this car? Well, we're told it's a hybrid, but it has the feel of a full electric BEV model from the get-go. You get in, there's a little chime, then eHEV branding flashes up across that futuristic digital screen in front of you. When you press the start button, there's no sign of an engine note, and when you select drive, you'll always pull away in electrified silence. So something different's afoot here. Honda usually does things differently, and we can't help liking that. Whether the model in question is a Civic, a Clarity fuel cell vehicle or a Type R hot hatch, you'll find that it's been uniquely engineered and packaged, and that's the case with this Jazz. Now, very uniquely packaged in this case, and it had to be. Fitting a full hybrid engine into a car this small, as competitors Toyota and Renault have found, takes a fair amount of engineering ingenuity, and particularly so in this case because Honda decided it didn't want to mate this powertrain with the kind of old-fashioned CVT belt-driven automatic gearbox which has traditionally afflicted the drivability of Toyota hybrids. So, ingenuity here is what we've got. This car does have an engine, but it's rarely used to drive the wheels, and this automatic gearbox shifter on the centre console here doesn't actually control an auto gearbox. The eHEV system doesn't actually use any sort of conventional transmission. Instead, there's a single ratio step-down gear which quite effectively mimics it. Honda calls this its eCVT, its electronically controlled continuously variable transmission. Now, it's easy to get confused at this point, so let's try to explain what's going on here. This Honda's eHEV hybrid system is made up of a 1.5 litre petrol engine and 2 DC electric motors. The engine's main job is to act as a generator, providing battery charge for the main propulsion motor to drive the front wheels. All of this accompanied by the kind of strange, hollow exterior sound that sounds a little bit like the low-speed warning noise that you get from some full electric models. Anyway, that's what will be happening in the hybrid drive mode that the powertrain will revert to for most of the time. But Honda did want this car to have some fully electrified zero emissions capability to differentiate this hybrid setup from the much less sophisticated IMA system it used a decade or so back with its Insight model. And that's why there's a second electric motor. In periods where the engine's operating, this additional motor harvests energy when coasting and braking and converts that into electricity, which, if it's not needed for immediate use, is then stored in a 0.86 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery packaged under the rear floor. This 35 kilowatt battery can then drive the car for short periods, very short in terms of distance, I mean not much more than 1.6 miles, without any engine input, either from start-off or when the car switches into its second driving mode, EV drive, and that's intended for low-speed urban use. The final drive mode that the eHEV system will use is engine drive, and that's a setting that's focused on harnessing the full 109 PS output of the hybrid powertrain for times of harsh acceleration or high-speed cruising. Now here, a clutch bypasses the pair of electric motors, allowing the combustion engine to directly drive the front wheels. In this state, the Jazz is theoretically capable of 62 miles an hour from rest in 9.4 seconds on the way to 109 miles an hour, but despite a reasonable 235 Nm torque output, it rarely feels that fast, and as with any kind of CVT auto gear mechanism, the revs soar skywards without much in the way of forward motion if you mash the throttle down into the floor. Accelerate lightly though, and the artificial ratio style steps inserted into the eCVT setup replicate the feel of a conventional auto quite effectively. It's certainly a way more drivable setup than that of the previous generation automatic Jazz. The kinds of customers who will appreciate all that cleverness won't be the kinds of folk who will want to regularly drive their Super Mini on its door handles, but Honda knew that efforts needed to be made here to deliver something a little less dynamically mediocre than what was served up by the third generation Jazz. So the engineers have redesigned the rear damper mounts, and they've toughened up the platform with extra high tensile steel to stiffen the body structure by 13%. Plus, they've further optimized the previous model's AHA, Agile Handling Assist torque vectoring system. During tight cornering at speed, this imperceptibly brakes your offside wheel at the inside of a curve. When power is applied, the excess torque then flows to the outer wheel that can better use it, and that helps to maximize traction, and it makes the car steer through the bends precisely and power out of it more quickly. In truth, you won't be particularly inclined to put very much of this to the test. Although you get the novelty of variable ratio steering in a Super Mini sized hatch and the response is quite accurate, there's still not enough feel through the helm to make you really confident about what the front wheels are doing in extremis. And despite the structural efforts that have been made, body roll at speeds through tighter turns is still more pronounced than with most rivals. That's particularly because of an understandable emphasis on ride comfort, which is supposed to have been enhanced by some improvements to the rear torsion beam suspension. Not enough has been done here in our view, because the Jazz does rather clatter over bumpy surfaces and it doesn't take very kindly to sharp intrusions like speed humps. Or at least it does in the standard form. The alternative Crossstar version, with its slightly softer springing and its higher ride height, deals with those poor surfaces rather more confidently. If you're sticking to this ordinary variant, choosing a lesser spec derivative with slightly smaller 15-inch wheels does help ride quality a bit. Perhaps predictably, given the new electrified remit, what is exceptional across the range is refinement, not only because of the eHEV system, but also because of the addition of low-friction suspension components and the installation of extra sound deadening material and thicker glass, all of which combine to deliver what Honda claims is a 10% reduction in cabin noise intrusion. The improvement actually feels greater than that, throttle back, and most of the time the only thing that you'll really hear is a bit of rustling around the mirrors. This all delivers a small car that you'd feel really confident in attempting large mileages in, and that's aided by a rare standard feature in a small hatch, adaptive cruise control, and ride quality that smooths out quite a lot when you get out on the highway. Around town, the combination of superlight steering, great all-round visibility and a relatively high seating position combine to make this Honda an ideal urban companion. Plus, the all-disc regenerative braking system is more progressive than the one in a rival Toyota Yaris hybrid. That makes it easier to ease smoothly to a halt. And you're guarded from worrying about speed cameras thanks to an intelligent speed limiter. Now that works with the standard traffic sign recognition system, so it always knows what the prevailing speed limit is, and it won't let you break it unless you persist on the throttle. Now theoretically, that might make speeding tickets a thing of the past. Combustion engine motoring is quickly also becoming a thing of the past, and it doesn't take long at the wheel of a Jazz to understand why. This fourth generation Jazz certainly stands out in a sea of Super Mini sameness. Now, whether you think it does that for the right reasons will be a matter of personal preference. Designer Baek Jong-kook talks of wanting to create what he calls a kind companion with a friendly, fresh appearance. Some will see that here. For us, though, there is something rather computer-generated about it. Two versions are being offered. This standard model, which is 40mm longer than its predecessor, and it sits 10mm lower, and this alternative crossover-themed Crossstar version, which is a little larger, higher and wider. Both continue the mini MPV styling theme of previous Jazz generations, visually emphasised by these quarter-light windows in the ultra-thin front A-pillars. The Super Mini MPV category was once so buoyant. Remember cars like the Vauxhall Meriva, the Nissan Note and the Ford B-Max? Well, it's out of fashion to launch a car classified in that way today, but in reality, this genre, that of a Super Mini with a people-carrying look and extra seating versatility, does remain alive and well for Jazz owners. Which doesn't help when it comes to creating the modern, assertive style that owners of the more conventional Super Minis, which Honda wants to target here, tend to expect. The Jazz designers have done their best, of course. All models get a set of de rigueur full LED headlights. The Honda logo gets blue tinting in keeping with this car's eco remit. The door mirrors, they're sleeker and they come silver finished on the plusher variants. And if you choose one of the top two trim levels, you'll get these LED lower fog lamps too. In profile, the monoform silhouette with its dramatically swept-back windscreen is more recognisable as a successive part of the Jazz model line. Smooth contours follow the short nose, the long roofline and cabin forward style of previous generations, and wheel size has been kept to 15 inches, or as in this case, 16-inch rims. Panelwork crease lines have been kept to the absolute minimum. The emphasis is instead on clean flowing surfaces, which follow a design philosophy based on the Japanese concept of you-know-be, a notion recognising the beauty of everyday items honed over time to make them more satisfyingly fit for purpose. At the back, there's a forward-leaning tailgate design intended to create more of a sure-footed stance. Honda has also refined the design of the rear spoiler and has added what it hopes is a premium-look light cluster design. Under the skin, as with the previous Mark III Jazz, there's an ACE, or Advanced Compatibility Engineering body structure. Now that allows impact forces to be exceptionally well absorbed by a now much stiffer vehicle architecture. The ratio of high tensile steel used here is up to 80%, and as a result, static bending is improved by 6%, while static torsion is improved by 13%. If you're a typical customer of this Honda though, the main reason you'll be choosing the Jazz will be for the class-leading cleverness of its cabin. Now, retaining that unique selling point whilst packaging in all the extra bulk of a fully electrified hybrid system will have massively challenged the ingenuity of Honda's designers. Time to find out how they've approached it. Certainly still feels very spacious when you take a seat behind the wheel in the clean, minimalist cabin with plenty of head and elbow room. That mini MPV feel we mentioned earlier is again much in evidence here. The high seating position, the wide view windscreen, these A-pillar quarter lights. You even get cup holders at either end of the dash top. But you might quickly conclude maybe this is just the way a modern, practical, versatile Super Mini should really be. Switching back to a more conventional small hatch certainly seems somewhat cramped and compromised after trying one of these. In short, there's a very different feel in here to anything else you'll find in the Super Mini segment, and that's something that you'll either love or you'll hate. This very different approach to small car design has some strange touches, some of which are just odd, strange fibre fascia pads and a ridiculously over-prominent instrument dimmer rotary control, for example, and some of which are brilliant, like the twin glove boxes and the provision of twin USB ports, each with separate functions, one of which will simply charge devices without trying to force smartphone mirroring on you. And it's all encompassed within an overriding design theme that sees the slim instrument panel sweep horizontally across the cabin in a manner that strongly replicates the brand's smaller, full-electric Honda E. The thin-rimmed two-spoke steering wheel is directly lifted from that car. It's here trimmed with cream-coloured Bakelite switches, some of which control your instrument cluster readouts. The readout takes the form of a screen. Of course, old-fashioned gauges would seem somewhat out of place in a car with such technology. And the display of the monitor in question is as willfully eclectic as the rest of the cabin design. There's no binnacle hood above it, which looks odd for a start, and it can sometimes make it hard to read in direct sunlight. And when the TFT digits spring into life, the wide range of information provided can initially look somewhat randomly displayed until you figure out what everything is and why it's there. Plus, the resolution and graphics aren't of the currently fashionably sharp kind. One writer likened it to the kind of screen you'd give a toddler to watch Peppa Pig on. But if you don't mind that, you'll not find too much to fault with the range of information available for selectable display. Using this little home button on the wheel rim, you can choose a trip computer or an MPG graph, or access settings for audio, phone, compass, speed, seat belts and safety, plus an energy monitor which shows you what's being charged by what as you drive. As for the other information you'll need, well, of course, it's displayed on the centre stack screen, the kind of thing that, to be frank, this Japanese brand hasn't historically been very good at. This 9-inch Honda Connect display, offered only if you can avoid entry-level trim, it's certainly an improvement on the company's previous efforts in terms of look and functionality, and it delivers most of what you'll need. The combination of an apps section and the aforementioned Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring feature will, for some customers, make the optional built-in Garmin navigation system that you get in the top spec variants unnecessary. Shortcut options along the base of the screen make accessing major functions easier, and both Wi-Fi connectivity and traffic information can feature. Plus, there's an enhanced level of intuitive AI tech voice control that's promised courtesy of the provided Honda Personal Assistant. It offers the potential for instruction-based conversations, although only if you have a data connection. That's fair enough if you want it to, for example, search for restaurants, parking spaces, fuel stations and so on as you drive, but it's just annoying if all you want to do is find a radio station or call the cabin. Enough with screens and media tech. What else do you need to know here? Well, Honda has put a lot of effort into improving the seats, which get 30mm of extra padding, and they're said to be structured for greater support around the lumbar region, although no adjustable lumbar support is offered. They're certainly a great deal more comfortable for longer trips, and it also helps that there's a wide range of steering wheel adjustment too, that the top of this central box here between the seats also functions as a comfortable armrest, and that the pedals, the seat and the steering wheel all line up nicely so that you're not sitting slightly skewed to one side. The other thing you notice pretty early on up front here, if you happen to be familiar with the previous generation model, is just how much better the front three-quarter view now is. The tall panoramic windscreen, the flat dashboard and the hidden wiper design all help here, but the main reason for this wide area feel lies with a 50% reduction in the thickness of the frontmost A-pillar. This has widened the view out from 69 to 80 degrees, virtually eliminating the usual roundabout and junction turning blind spots you normally have to contend with. Your rearward vision isn't as good thanks to thick rear pillars. That might be an issue with the base trimmed variant, which does without rear parking sensors. Those feature here at the top of the range, of course, along with a rear view camera. Perceived cabin quality isn't up to VW Group brand levels, and there are some areas where a bit more aesthetic design effort might have been nice. These rather plain door cards, for example, but everything's thoroughly well screwed together, and this Jazz model line's performance in customer satisfaction surveys suggest it will stay that way. Scratchy plastics, they're relegated to areas you already touch, and there's plenty of space to store things. Now, we mentioned the cup holders at either end of the dash top. There are more between the seats here. Just above this large cubby area ahead of the gear lever, you'll find those twin USB ports that we mentioned earlier. That's along with a 12-volt socket. Plus, each door pocket is big enough to hold a 250ml bottle of water. There's a ticket flap on the forward-facing edge of the sun visor here, and there's that lidded box between the seats that we mentioned earlier. You also get the twin glove boxes. Now, we talked about that a little while ago, although it's a pity that Honda hasn't thought to cool either one of them. There's no overhead sunglasses compartment, and you'd have thought that features like a front footwell side pocket would have gone with the whole mini MPV theme. Underseat storage would have suited this car's people-carrying vibe too, but you can't have that because of the positioning of the fuel tank underneath these front chairs. Still, that placement delivers the huge benefits in cabin versatility that we'll see further back. Time to check out the rear seat versatility that's always marked out this Jazz. Can Honda really have preserved that whilst packaging a full hybrid powertrain into this car? Well, basically, yes, they have, to a great extent anyway, which is in its own way as impressive as the hybrid tech itself. Thanks to the drivetrain's particularly compact design with its power control units, clever semiconductor technology and the super small eCVT gearbox setup, none of the electrified stuff has to sit outside the engine bay, so there's nothing to eat into passenger compartment or luggage space. And that's also meant that this car can continue to mount its fuel tank under the front seats rather than, as is more usual, under these rear ones. which has preserved one of this model line's strongest selling points, its so-called magic seat functionality. This means that, as before in a Jazz, you can lift the seat base up, cinema seat style, for the carriage of the kinds of tall items you normally wouldn't expect to be able to accommodate in a small car like this. Maybe a small potted tree you've bought from the garden centre, or perhaps a bulky item of electrical equipment. The other advantage of this approach to design means that an incredible amount of rear seat legroom can be liberated. Now, Honda somewhat ambitiously claims that there's more of it than you get in a Mercedes S-Class. Whether that's true or not, we're talking near Civic standards of back seat space here. 986 millimetres of rear legroom is by some distance a class-leading figure. And that's something further accentuated by the relatively lofty ceiling height. As for cabin width, well, no Super Mini is ever going to be truly suitable for 3 adults in the back, but if you absolutely have to take 3 fully sized people in a little hatch of this size, they'll be more comfortable in the back of this Honda than they would be in any other car in the segment. The low central transmission tunnel certainly helps here. Honda's made this rear bench more comfortable this time around too, increasing seat padding thickness by 24 millimetres and redesigning the Magic Seat structure in a way that allowed its hinges to be moved outside of the passenger hip points. It's a pity that the seat back no longer reclines though, and that the head restraints rather dig into your back until they're raised. Plus, there's this little hole down by the seat belt mounting where small items could easily fall. Compensatory added features include tiny smartphone pockets in the top of each seat back, and here at the top of the range there are twin USB ports too. Conventional seat back pockets also feature, and there are deep bottle holders in each of the doors, plus there's a coat hook on the right hand grab handle. As suggested earlier, that central fuel tank design also benefits luggage space, although not to such a great a degree as was the case with the previous generation Jazz. This model loses 50 litres of luggage capacity compared to that one. Packaging in the hybrid system hardware had to have some effect somewhere, but most customers will still find the 304-litre trunk capacity very acceptable, particularly as the trunk area is usefully square-shaped and it's accessed by this notably low loading lip. A large pushchair or 2 large suitcases will certainly fit. Here's another packaging benefit, this deep well beneath the boot floor. It's similar to the kind of thing you'd get in a Ford Puma for muddy boots or wet clothes, although here there's no base plug hole that would allow you to easily wash it out. We can't help thinking, actually, we'd prefer to have seen the space there used for carriage of a spare wheel, though. 2 eyes are set into the boot floor for tying things down, and you get a couple of bag hooks too. If you need more space, this one-motion 60-40 split rear seat back folds easily forward with a single push. There's no adjustable height boot floor, and you get this ridge at the back of the boot area, so the lengthened carriage floor can't be completely flat, but there's as much extended room as you could want from a small hatch, 1,205 litres. It is a bit disappointing that you can no longer have a fold-flat front passenger seat for really long items, but we really like the attention to detail that's portrayed by little touches, like this middle floor flap here, which covers an area that would otherwise snag longer items as you slid them in, and down which smaller items and dirt would otherwise fall. We had expected the extra technology here to cost quite a bit more, but it was still a bit of a surprise to find that going forward, the average Jazz customer will be paying £20,000 or more for this car, especially given that when we tested the updated previous generation version of this model, which wasn't actually all that long ago in 2018, this was a £14,000 to £18,000 Super Mini. To be accurate, it is actually possible to pay less than £20,000 for this 4th generation Jazz. An entry-level SE variant that was available from launch for around £19,000, but very few customers choose that because, as we'll see, it lacks a few crucial features that you'll probably want. So your starting point will probably be either mid-range SR trim, which we'd recommend and which from launch was priced from just over £20,000, or this plusher EX variant, which adds an extra £1,200 to the asking figure, and from the launch of this car was being offered on PCP finance for £239 a month over 3 years with a £4,278 deposit. That's about £40 more a month than you pay for the base SE version. If you're minded to plump for the EX, then your dealer will pigeonhole you as someone who would probably be happy to stretch another £400 upwards and find just under £22,500 for the top crossover themed Cross Star version, which can also be had with a two-tone paint finish for another £1,000. Now, you're going to feel a touch resentful about having to find those sorts of figures unless you really compare apples with apples here. After all, Ford will sell you a so-called hybrid 5-door version of their Fiesta for around £18,500, and hybrid versions of the Kia Rio and the Hyundai i20 can be had for even less. But these are what the industry calls mild hybrid superminis, which means that they don't have fully electrified engines, which at times can run solely on battery power. All mild hybrid tech gives you is a tiny extra battery under the front seat that boosts acceleration a bit, runs the stop-start system, and doesn't ultimately make a massive amount of difference to overall running cost figures. Which is why a proper full hybrid Super Mini like this one will cost you more. Yes, more to the tune of what Honda's asking here. There are only two full hybrid rivals to this Jazz in the Super Mini segment, the Toyota Yaris and the Renault Clio hybrid, and it's those two small hatches that you should also be considering if this car has already taken your interest. Now, both are marginally cleaner and more frugal than the Jazz, but there's very little in it. Honda is clearly most bothered about sizing up to the Toyota Yaris, and they've undercut that car on price by around £1,000 with base and mid-range Jazz models. A top Yaris and a top Jazz, though, will cost much the same. This Honda does have a slightly bigger boot, it has more rear seat space, and it has the advantage of the clever Magic Seat folding functionality. That Magic Seat formula also gives the Jazz an advantage over the more conventional cabin layout of the Renault Clio hybrid. Although the Renault does have a bigger boot, its hybrid engineering isn't as sophisticated though, and base and mid-range Clio hybrids cost around £500 more than their Jazz counterparts. Although again, the top versions of that Renault and the Honda cost about the same. For reference, it might be worth briefing you on how much it would cost to trade up to the next level of Super Mini electrification, that for full battery-powered zero-emission BEV models like the Peugeot E208 and the Vauxhall Corsa E. Now, for those, you'll generally be paying in the £26,000 to £30,000 bracket, and that depends on the trim level that you want. But then you'll be afflicted with the scourge of range anxiety as you drive with one eye on your rapidly depleting electric-only mileage capability between charges, and a typical Jazz customer won't want that. Ultimately, most buyers for this car will be people who once would have chosen an upper spec, conventionally powered combustion engine Super Mini, but who are now minded to put the price premium that they would once have devoted to the higher level of spec towards a greener dose of engine technology instead. Now, if that is you and you're ready to make the switch to a hybrid, then, as we said earlier, make absolutely sure that you know what you're getting. And bear in mind, if you are comparing against something conventional, that an ordinary combustion engine Super Mini would only really be directly comparable to this Honda when it was fitted with an extra cost automatic gearbox. Auto transmission is an integral part of the Jazz hybrid system. If, having considered all that, you find yourself increasingly attracted by what this Honda has to offer, then you'll want to know just how generous this Japanese brand has been when it comes to the standard equipment. So let's take a look at that right now. The fundamentals here really don't change with trim. All Jazz variants use the same 1.5 litre iMMD hybrid power plant with that auto gearbox I just mentioned. And of course, they all get Honda's clever Magic Seat system, and also much the same level of Honda Sensing safety kit too. What is different with SE trim is the level of media connectivity you get. At this level in the range, customers have to be satisfied with a small 5-inch monitor audio centre dash screen with Bluetooth, but without much else in the way of modern media connectivity. Plus, there are no rear parking sensors to help you to get into spaces, and you get a rather basic look courtesy of plain 15-inch steel wheels. But you may quite reasonably feel you could live without any of that, in which case a base spec Jazz might conceivably suit you rather well. It does get all the same safety kit that you'd find on a much plusher model. Now we're going to cover that off in just a moment. And you can also tick off quite a few other things that you might have to pay extra for on some rivals. Full LED headlights, climate control, automatic air conditioning, rain sensing wipers and auto headlamps with high beam support so that they dip themselves at night for you. There's also adaptive cruise control with a speed limiter to help preserve your licence through urban areas and roadworks. If you've decided on a Jazz though, you'll typically be the kind of customer who wants something a bit nicer than SE level trim. Now our suggestion for the ideal starting point for your perusal in the lineup would be with mid-range SR spec. Now this adds in parking sensors at the front and the rear, along with 15-inch alloy wheels, an alarm, electrically folding door mirrors and upholstery in a combination of fabric and leather, plus detailed touches like soft pad leather interior panels and a driver's seat back pocket. The main addition at SR level though is a proper level of media connectivity. That's courtesy of a Honda Connect 9-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring and 2 USB jacks. The brand has worked on the voice control element of this kind of setup, and they've come up with what it calls the Honda Personal Assistant. Now this uses Alexa-style AI smart artificial intelligence so that you can have instruction-based conversations with the Honda Connect system. Instructions like, "OK Honda, find me an Italian restaurant with free parking and Wi-Fi that's open now," are apparently possible. Although unusually we haven't been able to try that here because unlike other personal assistant systems we've recently tested, this one needs a strong data connection in order to be able to work. Anyway, that covers what you get with the Jazz SR. We can see why you might not want to go too much further up the Jazz range. And the next variant up, this plush EX version, gives you bigger 16-inch wheels, which don't really help ride quality, and a Garmin built-in navigation system for the Honda Connect infotainment screen, which isn't a patch on the kind of navigation app that in an SR variant you could activate on that same display via Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Still, this EX does have a few nice-to-have features that you might want. Stuff like smarter grey or black fabric leather upholstery, a heated steering wheel, front heated seats, keyless entry and a rear view camera. Plus you get 2 USB ports in the back, and you can shut the windows and retract the door mirrors via the key fob. And there's also a couple of extra camera safety features at this level in the range too. We'll tell you about those in just a moment. And the EX variant looks smarter too. That's thanks not only to these bigger wheels, but also because of the addition of chrome door mirrors, LED front fog lights and rear privacy glass. And finally, if you've definitely made up your mind to plump up Honda's bottom line, there's the top Cross Star variant, which gets a crossover styling pack with roof rails and changes to the front and rear bumpers, to the front grille and the garnishes around the front fog lights. Plus there's black plastic finishing around the side sills and the wheel arches. Inside there's a premium 8-speaker audio system and water repellent upholstery. All Jazz customers get access to the My Honda Plus smartphone app, which aims to keep owners connected to their cars remotely. Like most such apps, this one can let you lock or unlock the car from wherever you are, and it'll alert you if the alarm goes off. The app also provides location monitoring and car tracking via GPS to provide anti-theft peace of mind. And an intelligent geofencing feature allows preset geofence zones to be activated so that when, if you should loan the car out, say to your son or daughter, you'll be alerted on the smartphone if they've ventured too far in it. If you have a Jazz variant with the Garmin sat-nav system fitted, then the app will allow you to plan journeys in advance on your phone or tablet and then download them directly into the car when you get into it. Whichever variant you choose, the standard spec will probably cover most of what you're going to need, but if you don't want to go further, then your dealer will be happy to tell you about the various options on offer. Let's start with aesthetics and a couple of rather awkwardly named option packs that your dealer will suggest that you consider if you want to enhance the looks of your car, both of which include a set of Elegance floor mats. The functional finesse pack that adds silver trimming for the front grille, painted side body trims with matte silver coloured inserts and a rear bumper decoration. If you'd prefer a sportier look, the Functional Fun Pack Orange adds that colour to the front grille, the door mirror covers, the side body trims and the rear bumper. The Functional Fun Pack is also available in piano white if, understandably, you think this Jazz would look rather odd with orange flashings all over it. As for the Cross-Star variant, well, we mentioned earlier, you can specify the contrast coloured dark roof at extra cost, and it's also possible to add in what Honda calls front and rear lower decorations. A rear roof spoiler is also offered, and you can add in 15 or 16-inch alloy wheels if the Jazz variant you've chosen doesn't already have them. Various pearl and metallic paint finishes are offered. We have premium Sunlight white pearl here. The Cross-Star variant offers that extra surf blue shade. As for practical touches, well, there's the premium pack, which includes Elegance floor mats, side body trims, doorstep garnishes, a bumper step protector and front and rear mud guards. Those are all features that can be ordered separately. There's also a cargo pack that'll give you a boot tray and an LED cargo light, plus a rear bumper step protector and a boot seal decoration. You might also want to look at roof carrier bars, to which you can add ski and snowboard attachments, a bicycle carrier and a 410-litre roof box. Other optional features include a parking aid camera, a windscreen cover and rubber floor mats. If you want the interior to have more of a luxurious feel, then there's the illumination pack that includes front white ambient lights, illuminated doorstep garnishes, illuminated door linings and centre console illumination. Again, you can order those features separately if you want to. So on to safety. Proactive safety equipment featured quite prominently on the last generation Jazz model, but there the active features were driven by a radar system. A wide view camera can offer much more these days when it comes to this kind of thing. So Honda has provided that here, and it enhances the safety system's field of vision and allows more nighttime operation. For example, the collision mitigation braking system, that's Honda's autonomous braking setup, and that replaces the previous City Brake active system, can now detect pedestrians when there's no street lighting and alert the driver when it detects errant cyclists. In addition, collision mitigation braking, that now applies the brakes when the Jazz cuts across or turns into the path of an oncoming vehicle. As we mentioned earlier, auto high beam, now that works over 25 miles an hour, and adaptive cruise control, they're also standard. Now, if you've driven the previous generation Jazz, you'll also quickly note how this one's road departure mitigation system now notices when you veer towards the road edge too, as well as warning you if you cross lane delineating centre lines without indicating, in which case a lane keeping assist system will gently steer you back to where you ought to be. There is also a preceding vehicle proximity warning distance feature to stop you from getting too close to the car in front. And traffic sign recognition, that is another standard part of the package. And in this case, it's a bit different because where it shows on the 7-inch instrument binnacle display, 2 road signs can be displayed at any one time, one for speed, another for highway instructions, no passing or no entry, for example. This traffic sign feature also drives this Jazz model's intelligent speed limiter. From the traffic sign recognition system, this setup knows what the prevailing speed limit is, and it won't let you break it unless you persist on the throttle. Now, theoretically, of course, that might make speeding tickets a thing of the past. We mentioned earlier that this EX model and the top Cross-Star variant have a couple of extra camera safety features. There's blind spot information, and that stops you from dangerously pulling out when there's a vehicle in your blind spot, and a cross-traffic monitor, and that warns you of oncoming vehicles when you're reversing out of a space. Across the range, Honda hasn't forgotten to enhance passive safety. Jazz owners and occupants are now protected by no fewer than 10 airbags, including 2 new rear side airbags installed in the rear seats and a new front centre airbag installed in the front seat. That front centre airbag is unique in class, and it activates in the event of a collision to reduce impact caused by contact between passengers. As before, there are whiplash mitigating front headrests and Honda's now much stiffer ACE, or Advanced Compatibility Engineering body structure, technology that sees a network of connected structural elements distribute crash energy more evenly throughout the front of the vehicle in the event of an impact, reducing the forces transferred to the passenger compartment. All of that builds on the normal safety features you now expect on a car of this kind. Like every currently new design model, this one gets an eCall system that in the event of an accident where the airbags go off will automatically advise the emergency services of your exact GPS location. Plus, of course, you get all the usual passive safety features, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, tyre deflation warning system and hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. There's stability control, of course, Honda's VSA vehicle stability assist system, plus the usual ABS braking setup with a brake assist feature to help in emergency stops, and they'll be advertised to following motorists by automatically activating hazard lights. AHA, Agile Handling Assist, increases cornering traction, and an EDDB, Early Downshift During Braking system, automatically increases engine speed to provide engine braking in deceleration, downhill or cornering situations. There's also what Honda calls a fast off feature that maintains engine revs if you come off the throttle pedal too quickly. As you might say, if you've pulled up to overtake, but you suddenly have to abandon the manoeuvre. That's the sort of scenario that might cause a skid on an icy morning. Now, this may be the first of Honda's E-technology models, but actually a larger 2-litre version of much the same kind of E-HEV engine has been sold by the brand since 2018, fitted to their CR-V mid-sized SUV. And we noted when trying that model that the quoted fuel and efficiency stats were a little way behind obvious hybrid rivals. Fortunately, this Jazz gets a little closer to the class standard. Think 62.8 mpg and 102 grams per kilometre of CO2 on the WLTP cycle. You'll need some segment perspective on that. A Renault Clio hybrid manages 64.2 mpg and 98 grams per kilometre. Those are figures that a Toyota Yaris hybrid, helped by its lighter curb weight, improves to 68.9 mpg and 92 grams per kilometre. We also want to tell you that the top Crossstar version, with its higher ride height and larger wheels, is a fraction less frugal than the standard version. That manages 58.9 mpg and 110 grams per kilometre. Real-world efficiency stats, though, have a lot more to do with driving style than engineering, and our own experience here is that we've already tested a more economical Super Mini that is in any way fossil-fueled. Genuine returns of over 60 miles per gallon are commonplace with this Honda. In fact, the selectable fuel readout graph on the instrument cluster screen doesn't even start until the 40 miles per gallon mark. There is also an MPG meter on the trip computer readout and a little leaf graphic display when you power off, and that shows you how economical your recent driving has been. Another selectable display that you can view through the steering wheel here is admittedly rather basic energy monitor, which allows you to see at any time what's being powered by what. Unfortunately, unlike in a Yaris, this graphic isn't replicated in more detail on the centre stacked screen. The stats we've given are based on use of the usual hybrid drive mode, where the engine is functioning as a generator for the main propulsion motor. Urban driving is where the car reverts to its all-electric EV drive mode. That will obviously help to ease closer to those readings in regular motoring, as will frequent use of the provided Econ button, which, as these kinds of things usually do, restricts throttle travel and also the climate control performance in pursuit of extra frugality. What else? Well, running costs are about more than just fuel and CO2 readings, and when it comes to the all-important issue of residual values, this Jazz does perform well. After 3 years and 60,000 miles, the previous generation model retained around 40% of its original list price, and we'd expect this fourth generation version to perform equally as well. That's an impressive showing by segment standards, and a far better one than you'd expect from a rival Fiesta, Corsa, Clio, Fabia or Ibiza. Many customers will want to budget ahead for scheduled maintenance with a fixed price scheme called Five. Now this includes 5 years worth of maintenance, an extended warranty for that period too, and roadside assistance breakdown cover should the worst happen. Now this can be transferred to any new owner if you sell the car on before the service plan is expired. Maintenance info can be recorded on a specific section of the central Honda Connect screen. Service intervals are every year or 12,000 miles, but the car's service reminder system can tell the driver when work's needed. You'll also need to know that the 3-year 90,000 mile warranty is better than the package you get from many rivals, and when it expires, a Honda Extended Guarantee can be purchased, which for either a further 12 months or a further 24 months will give you European breakdown cover and protection against mechanical and electrical faults. Insurance is rated at Group 19A for the base SE variant and the Crossstar. It's 20A for the SR and EX models. This is quite simply the most advanced Super Mini that we've ever tested. The engineering on offer here makes what you'll find beneath the bonnet of most other small hatches feel from a different and less sophisticated age. Now that Honda has managed to package it into this Jazz while still retaining most of this model line's trademark interior flexibility is deeply impressive. Has anything been sacrificed along the way? Well, a little. In almost every way, this is undoubtedly a better Jazz than any of its predecessors, but it's possible that a typical segment buyer might find it a touch more difficult to bond with. The perfect automotive appliance, after all, isn't quite the same thing as the perfect small car. Now, if you're loyal to this model line, if, in the words of Louis Armstrong, you has Jazz, then that probably won't matter. Here you'll be getting absolutely everything that this little Honda has always offered, and a bit more besides. Whether this Super Mini has soul won't matter much, nor will the fact that rivals can offer more engaging driving dynamics. Both those things actually are important to us in testing a small hatch, but we find it hard not to admire the way that a lot of the best bits of electrified and combustion engineering have been combined here. And we're astonished that 2 decades after this model line first pioneered the way that Magic Seat functionality could create a TARDIS-like cabin in a car of this size, no rival has yet fully copied the concept. We'd go as far as to say that in many ways this Super Mini is a more practical choice than many Focus segment family hatchbacks from the next class up. But can this car really justify its now higher price point? Well, we think so, yes, in mid-spec form anyway. We really can't see why you'd pay a lot more for the lifestyle look of the Crossstar version. We'd suggest you stick instead to the essential Jazz formula. Honda certainly has, and loyal buyers will want to too. Try one of these and you'll understand why.